Thank you for coming. It's a pleasure to be here. It's noisy out there. What's going on back there? Just getting used to the smoke behind me here. No, I'm pleased to come here. What I'm going to do, I'm going to talk for a while. I've got about 3 different sections of things that we'll deal with, but I'll do my first one. Then I may throw us open to questions then and kind of pick up the other 2 as we go along, because maybe you'll ask the right question and then I'll just talk about the thing I was thinking of talking about. And if you don't, then I'll just talk about it anyway. But excuse me. I have a more serious matter to discuss at first, my first item. Because there's been quite a bit of talk or thought and discussion higher up about the show and about the response that the show is having. And there's a fair degree of concern about the effect of the show and how people are reacting to the show. And so they're rather pleased that I'm doing this tour so that I get a chance to talk to various groups of viewers and see if we can clarify our intention in the show. But the main problem seems to be that most viewers seem to think that Mulder and Scully are the heroes of the show. And some of us have a different view. I'm going to ask you to look at the show from a slightly different angle, to do a kind of academic study, if you like, and we'll compare and contrast the characters of cigarette-smoking man and Mulder, and at the end of which we'll see if you still consider that the heroes of the show are Mulder and Scully. It's a very paranormal event happening outside. Strange things happen when you work on this show. But comparing Mulder and CSM, we'll call CSM Cancer Man, Cigarette Smoking Man. We'll call him CSM for short for now. So I'm going to compare these 2 characters under several different headings. And the first heading will be outcomes. Let's suppose that each of these 2 characters were to get what they want. Then let's imagine what would happen. Suppose Mulder gets what he wants. Well, what does he want? He wants to find the truth, whatever he thinks that is. He wants to find it. So let's suppose he finds the truth. What do you think he'll do with it? Is it your impression of Mulder that he's a thoughtful, careful, reasoning sort of person who will do something intelligent and sensible with this information that he finds? I expect he will go on Larry King Live and blab it to the whole world. And what will happen when he does that? Panic. People will be terrified. Those scenes from Independence Day where everybody's loading up the cars and running out of town, that's what will happen, I think, if Mulder gets what he wants. If he gets the truth and he irresponsibly blabs it out on television. Now let's suppose that CSM gets what he wants. Well, we don't know exactly what he does want, and there's something to do with the project, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But he seems to want to cover up the truth. So let's suppose that CSM is successful in covering up the truth. What will happen? Nothing. You won't know. The truth will be covered up. Everything will go on as it is. There'll be a few kooks around who think aliens exist, and that'll be it. Now, which outcome would you prefer? Panic or going on as you are? So, on the issue of outcomes, perhaps we have to give it to CSM over Mulder. Let's talk about sacrifice. Mulder and CSM. Which character do we think has sacrificed the most in pursuit of his goals? Well, what's Mulder sacrificed? As far as I know, he's doing exactly what he wants to do. He wants to be an FBI agent, and he wants to go and pursue the truth, and that's what he's doing. What's more, he's doing it with a very attractive woman. Sounds pretty good to me. It's true, he doesn't have any personal life, but he hasn't shown much interest in having a personal life. We'll discuss that a little bit more in a bit. Now, what has CSM sacrificed? Well, his health, and he's sacrificed his personal life. We know that he wanted to have one, he began to have one, he might have had a bit of a one, because we know there was once upon a time some kind of a relationship with Mrs. Mulder. We know that now he lives alone and has no personal life. So CSM has sacrificed his personal life in pursuit of his goals. So in terms of sacrifice, we have to give it to CSM over Mulder. With me so far? What about an act of love? Which of these two characters has committed a greater act of love? Well, it's true that when Scully was kidnapped, abducted and taken away up there somewhere, Mulder got pretty upset, and he went running around trying to find her and stuff, and he came into my apartment and waved a gun in my face, and he's always doing that. But I mean, is this really an act of love? I mean, Scully was his partner, so I'm sure it's in the FBI handbook that if your partner's in trouble, you go and help your partner. So he's running around helping his partner, just as he's supposed to do, as he was trained to do, and so on. So I don't think it's any really big act of love that he did that. On the other hand, if you remember when Scully got the cancer, and it seemed that CSM might have some way of curing the cancer if someone would do what CSM wanted done. So it was possible for someone to save Scully's life. Did Mulder do that? No. Skinner tried to do that. Skinner risked his career and did all these things for CSM to try and save Scully's life. When the going got rough, he quit, of course, but that's something else. But then Mulder found out that Skinner had been doing this to save Scully's life. Now, if you were a person of love and you found out that Skinner had been doing all these things to save Scully's life, what would you do? You'd say, let me do it, wouldn't you? You'd say, I'll take that on. I want to save Scully's life. I will do that. Is that what Mulder did? No. Mulder helped Skinner hide the evidence and cover up the whole thing. Mulder's a chicken-livered pup. Scully still has cancer. On the other hand, when Mrs. Mulder was dying, CSM at great risk to himself. If you remember, the opening episode from last season brought the bounty hunter, the alien, who had powers of healing, into the hospital, lied to him some stupid reason why he had to do this, and the bounty hunter cured Mrs. Mulder. At great risk to CSM, if he were ever caught doing that, goodness knows what would happen. So, which character has committed a greater act of love, CSM or Mulder? CSM. How are we doing so far? 3-0 for CSM. Okay. Here's what, yeah. Style. Mulder, CSM, style. Who's more sophisticated? Who seems to be better educated? Anyway. Suppose you had to choose a leader, and your choices were Mulder on the one hand or CSM on the other. Progress. Well, let's look at a few qualities that you might consider. I mean, simply enough, Mulder's pretty young, and he acts younger, whereas CSM is older, presumably wiser, more experienced. So just on the level of maturity versus youth, we'd have to give it to CSM. What about just kind of emotional stability? Yeah. Mulder gets involved with something, he gets very excited. He gets carried away. He runs around. He waves guns about. He does all sorts of stuff. Whereas CSM is thoughtful, takes his time, considers the matter, delegates. So, at a kind of emotional level, I think I'd give it to CSM, but you may like a hot-headed leader. I don't know. And this one may be a bit, I don't know, this may be a bit quibbly, but Mulder's always waving a gun around. You notice that? You know, it doesn't matter, just at a moment's notice, out comes the gun. Would you want that in a leader? Would you want a leader who's always pulling the gun out? I don't know if you've noticed, but CSM does not carry a gun. CSM plans and thinks. That's a little point maybe. But there's this one. Mulder, I think he's a virgin. Well, think about it. If you worked that closely for 5 years with Gillian Anderson, wouldn't there be some reaction? I mean, just something. I mean, I don't have much hope for Mulder. CSM, on the other hand, we know is sexually experienced. I mean, he said to Mrs. Mulder, he said, if you remember, he said something about Bill Mulder. He was a good water skier, your husband. Not as good as I was. But that could be said about so many things, couldn't it? And Mrs. Mulder said, I've repressed it all. Now, you can take what meaning you like, but I take the meaning that there was some sexual activity between them. So on the basis of just life experience, I think we have to give it to CSM. Now, this is another quibble here, but I'm in a quibbly mood. Whenever it gets a little bit dark, Mulder pulls out a flashlight. I mean, maybe he has eye trouble. Do you think maybe he doesn't see very well? But CSM sits in the dark all the time, lives in the dark, never needs a flashlight, never needs glasses. So CSM, I think, clearly has superior eyesight to Mulder. That may not be an important or a key ingredient in a leader, but it's nice to know that they can see what's going on if they're going to be your leader, right? So we got all these things that would seem to indicate that CSM would be a better leader. He's committed greater sacrifices. He's had more active love, etc., 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 etc. So maybe you say, yes, yeah, but what's he up to? What about the project? What about this colonization stuff? Because there's all these, not a lot, haven't been a lot of references to colonization, but there have been a few, you know, and Bill Mulder, when Jeremiah Smith morphed into Bill Mulder, he talked about colonization, and they talked about the date is set and that sort of stuff. So it seems like CSM is involved in something to do with colonization, whatever that might be. And you probably think that's worrying. You probably have a negative attitude to colonization. You probably think about rape and pillage and stuff like that, but I'm just going to ask you to think neutrally about colonization for a minute. It's not good, it's not bad, it's just what it is. It's harder for you, I know, because in your tradition, your American tradition, you think it was a terrific thing that you all got your guns out and beat up the British and stuff and became an independent country. Whereas my ancestors thought you were all crazy and went up to Canada and stayed in the colonies. So I may just personally have a more tolerant attitude to colonization than you do. But how do you think we've lived as humans over the centuries? I mean, we're not that good at it, are we? I mean, we keep having fights, serious wars, mass slaughter. I mean, we do pretty terrible things to one another. And yet, there's other times where people live comfortably and in peace. Now, is there a way in which those periods of comfort and peace could be extended? And those risks of war and all that reduced? Well, perhaps if some people, some power, some authority were to take control of the planet, they could take on all those struggles among themselves and allow the rest of the world to live happily. I don't know if you remember the debate in Talitha Kumi, which was the episode at the end of season 3, in which Jeremiah Smith, the alien who's going around healing people, CSM gets him, puts him in jail, and they have a debate. And they have a debate about the project, and Jeremiah Smith says he doesn't believe in the project anymore, and CSM argues with him about the benefits of the project. And Jeremiah Smith gets in such trouble in this debate that he has to morph into other characters and then finally tell me that I have cancer, which is really off the topic. But that episode, as it happens, is based on the brothers Karamazov and the chapter The Grand Inquisitor, in which, in the time of the Inquisition, Christ comes back and starts to work miracles. And the cardinal hauls him in and tells him to go away, that we have harmony established. You're going to disrupt everything. And so somehow we still don't know exactly what the project is, and we still don't know what the colonization is, but it may be that it's in our best interest, that these leaders will take on all this pain, take on the toxins of society, so that you can live doing the things you like to do, whatever they may be. You might not get to vote, but then understand only 18% of you voted in the last presidential election anyway. So what do you care? Anyway, that's another, that's another subject. All right, so if the project's neutral, CSM is clearly superior to Mulder, how come you guys all think that Mulder and Scully are the heroes? What have we done wrong in producing this show? Well, we think maybe it's the lighting and the music. So we're going to correct these errors in the movie. And in the coming season, actually. So whenever CSM appears this season, he will be bathed in a warm pink light. And whenever Scully appears, she'll be lit from the floor in a sharp angle. We'll find a wrinkle. Whenever Mulder and Scully come on, there will be foreboding music, dark. Whenever I come on, we'll have harp music. I've been working on my smoking all summer. They wanted me to do this so that I could blow smoke rings, so that whenever I come on, there'll be a halo around my head. And then finally, you'll understand this is a show about CSM, the adventures of the cigarette-smoking man. Well, I tell the story, I make the argument, obviously partly with tongue-in-cheek and partly to be entertaining, but also partly just to talk about how an actor works. I don't really expect I've convinced you that CSM is the hero of the show. But for me, CSM is the hero of the show, because that's the only way I can play the part. I mean, the only way an actor can play a villain is to believe that you're the good guy and that everybody else is wrong. That somehow what you're pursuing is more important and has to be pursued, and what the other people are doing is wrong or bad or whatever. And so I spend a lot of time in my prep work figuring out why I think I'm right and why I think they're wrong. And it's probably, I have to admit, just as well that you don't agree, but it's fun to try to convince you. The two other themes that I want to talk about tonight, but, well, maybe we'll see how we're doing. Maybe we'll get into a couple of them. There's two of them that came out of questions that I get asked a lot. And then one is, do I believe in aliens? And the other is, why is the show so popular? Maybe to take the second one first, because I'd be asked this question in interviews all the time. Why is the show so popular? And I would give sort of pat answers like, you know, it's intelligent, there's good stories, there's interesting ideas, it's well written, it's good lighting, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All of which is true, but it doesn't explain what's happened with this show. There's lots of other good shows that are well written and all those things that haven't become basically cult. Well, cult's not even the right word. You may not even realize in the US how big this show is. In Europe, it's huge. In Australia, it's huge. In Japan, it's huge. It's a phenomenon. And it's a very interesting question. Why is it a phenomenon? Why has this happened? And I suspect that if you were to take a media class in the year 2150, let's say, at California State, you'd be sitting in this auditorium and some anthropologist would be discussing the X-Files and the phenomenon of the X-Files. So I'm going to hazard a few things on this, because it connects with another question with my other hat on I often get asked is, why is Shakespeare so important? And to put Shakespeare and the X-Files in the same breath may seem odd, but bear with me for a minute. When I used to talk about Shakespeare and why is Shakespeare so important, I mean, it's pretty amazing, really, that in 1600 there was one dramatist who wrote 36 plays that are still 400 years later being studied all over the world. I mean, how is it that anybody could have created work of that kind at that time and not before and not since? That's my question. Why not before? Why not since? Why just then in the Renaissance? And what I see in Shakespeare in the Renaissance was that Shakespeare, bear with me, it may seem a little off topic, but it'll come around. That Shakespeare, the Renaissance was on a cusp of one world going into another world, from the pre-literate world going into the literate world. And what provoked that was the invention of the printing press. Quite simply, the invention of the printing press. And there's lots of people who have written about this, both anthropologically and historically and psychologically, the effect of learning to read printed matter and what it does to our brain. But to just give you a couple of little highlights, in the Middle Ages, nobody put their name on a painting or a song or a piece of music. And in our age, everybody puts their name on everything, and if they think somebody's stolen their work, they fight like crazy to defend it, etc., etc. But nobody cared in the Middle Ages. Nobody was trying to write their work. They were contributing to the environment and to God, basically. People in the Middle Ages or in pre-literate societies don't seem to see themselves as separate individuals from the environment that they live in. They somehow see themselves connected. And who knows what's right or wrong, but as we go into the literate world, there's a sense of the human person of ourselves, the self, being separate somehow from the environment, which has given us terrific power to manipulate the environment, to study the environment, has unleashed science and exploration and all those things, along with a whole lot of perhaps psychological distress at what does it feel like to be an island. But not to spend too long on that subject, which I could spend a lot of time on, but Shakespeare had a foot in both worlds, both the pre-literate world and its sense of superstition, its witchcraft, all that kind of stuff, and its oral traditions, its verbal traditions, its verbal skills, and the modern world with its objective eye and its sense of lineality and its sense of creativity and potentiality. And by having a foot kind of in both camps, he was able to create a work and a series of works that couldn't be created later, because once you got out of one camp, you're only in one of them. And so for the next 400 years, we've had some very good work, but nothing with the genius of Shakespeare, in language at any rate. So where does this take us on the X-Files? Takes us to the electronic revolution, I think. And it may well be that we are going from a literate age and a print age to the electronic age, and that that's going to dramatically change who we are, how we view the world. You'd be surprised to know, because you're all pretty young, that when I grew up, we believed our political leaders. We believed what was written in a book. I know, it's quite phenomenal. We really didn't think there were conspiracies. I mean, there may have been, and we may have been crazy. But the point was, the world has changed enormously. People now are much more suspicious. Despite the plethora of information, people don't know what to believe anymore. We see a real breakdown in lineality, by which I mean, instead of seeing things kind of in long stretches of lines, things are breaking into smaller units. The United Kingdom just devolving into different provinces as we speak. Yugoslavia, of course, we know, breaking into all its old tribal connections. And this is happening all over. And it's not an accident. It's not a chance. It's not by chance. It's because we're moving into a different era. The electronic and the digital world is changing us. Things, for one thing, when things are much more ephemeral. You know, when I grew up, how do you know that's true? It's in the book. Oh yeah? Let me see the book. Here's the book. Oh, okay. Now, how do you know it's true? Well, I think it's true. I saw it on the net. Yeah, but it's not there now. Somebody else said, you know, it was on my screen, but the screen doesn't last. The screen's little dots going across this, and it's transitory. And so I think the X-Files has a foot in each camp of the literate and the electronic. And that what gives it its real strength is the way it touches this whole question that we don't know what's going on. And we don't trust our information anymore. And we send two attractive people, I have to admit they're attractive, Mulder and Scully, out to try and solve these things for us. But one of the big differences between the X-Files and its clones, if you like, is the whole sense of enigma, the whole sense of uncertainty. Whereas the clones will often say, here's a ghost, and you'll see a ghost, there's a ghost. But in the X-Files, there's a ghost, maybe. Think there was a ghost, I'm not sure, it might have been. But we never know. The questions open, and then the questions turn around, and we're never sure. Anyway, that's my quick kind of anthropological survey of Shakespeare and the X-Files. So maybe at that point, maybe I'll stop talking for a bit and open us up to questions. As they say on Sports Talk, open phones, ask anything you want, anything to do with the show, anything you'd like to talk about. If you just come to, I think we have just the one microphone. If they'd like you to come to the microphone so everybody can hear the question that you ask. Don't be shy. And we'll see what we can talk about. Go ahead, yeah.
Is CSM Mulder's father?
Is CSM Mulder's father? We're getting right down to it, aren't we? I don't know. If I did know, I wouldn't be allowed to tell you. So what can I say in answer to that question? One of the things that frustrates me now is that because we've shot the movie, we've shot a couple of episodes that you're about to see, I now actually have some information. Quite often, because there's we run so close to the line in getting the scripts. Quite often I'm talking to groups of people like this, and I don't know any more than you do, and I can play fan just right along with you, and we can all just kind of kick it around. But you know, of course, I'm sworn to secrecy, and I'm not allowed to give you any real information. So, what I have often thought about that is that there was a relationship with Mrs. Mulder, and she had some children, and failing a DNA test, who knows? And so maybe I protect Mulder just in case he might be my son. But this is only basically a fan response, as much as yours might be. I was going to say we'll find out. I don't know if we'll, you never know with this show. You find something out, and then you're not sure whether you really found it out or not. But the issue will get addressed somewhat. It's a good question. Who else?
Okay, I know that in one of the episodes, I noticed that Mulder took Scully's eggs and kind of stuck them into his pocket, and I was wondering if that would have anything to do with her surviving this cancer in the future.
Mulder took Scully's eggs?
Yes, in one of the episodes, it was in this long hallway, and there were all these little drawers, and they had in there, from what I understand, they were her eggs.
Oh, I
frozen.
see. Gosh, I missed that somehow. But it might, because certainly the thing about that cancer seems to be that it has something to do with the implant in some way. And of course, that's part of one of the theories of abductions is that they impregnate people and then they take it away and then they give it back. And people really believe this, but we'll talk about that maybe if we get to it. Yeah.
Well, I have two questions, actually. Are we going to learn Cigarette Smoking Man's real name?
I think I can safely say, not so far as I know. I don't know it yet, so I'm not keeping anything back.
And also, Jillian's single, right?
I hate to tell you, she seems pretty attached to this guy, and I've seen him working out in the gym, and seen him sitting there. He's a pretty big-looking sort of a guy.
That hurts.
Yeah, I know. What can I tell you? There was a moment, but you missed it, after she broke up with her husband.
Hi. You mentioned earlier that The X-Files has huge appeal around the world. Since so much of the show is based in American pop culture, how does that translate into foreign countries, and do they adjust the scripts a little bit?
No, they don't adjust the scripts because the scripts are dubbed in the foreign languages. Brilliantly, I might say. I've seen it in Italian, and it's amazing. The Italian voices are terrific. My voice is just wonderful. Mulder's voice, David's voice, is a little more committed than David is. David has this kind of sort of bland kind of thing sometimes. But the Italian voice is just a little more committed. So you got this kind of bland face and then this committed voice. It's very effective. How did I get onto that? Oh, because they don't change the script. No, not at all. Well, there's a couple of things on that. I mean, they're so inundated now with American movies and all that stuff. I think they're all pretty familiar with American culture now. The other thing I sometimes wonder if one of the reasons the show is so popular outside of the U.S. is they've always thought the U.S. government was corrupt and conspiratorial, and now they get to watch the Americans say that it is.
Is there a reason Cancer Man doesn't like the Bills?
Doesn't like what?
The Buffalo Bills?
Well, funny you should ask that, because I spoke in Buffalo last night. I was quite nervous about it. And not only that, but the Bills lost yesterday while I was in town. There's a lot in that episode that I think is fairly fanciful. I can't imagine, frankly, that CSM cares a darn. He doesn't show himself as a sports fan at any other time. So I think it was just the authors. I don't know, let's have a little fun. Talk to me. Ask me a question.
Are any of the episodes based on actual FBI cases that you know
That's a really good question, and that I don't know. But I'll segue that into my other theme for a minute, because I was on a panel last week with John Mack. Do any of you know who John Mack is? Well, he's a Harvard psychiatrist and is probably the leading exponent now of the belief that aliens are actually abducting people, which he believes and argues for and has written about. And he works with what they call the experiencers, the people who believe that they have been abducted. And a lot of the X-Files, some of the X-Files is definitely based on that. Because I thought Chris had made up a lot of this stuff, about the genetic experiments and the implanting of aliens and all that stuff. But actually, that all comes out of what the experiencers or the abductees have been reporting. So in that sense, he's actually dealing with stuff that's really been written about and talked about. Curiously, none of those cases have ever been reported to the FBI. For 20 years, people have been being abducted by aliens, apparently, but not one of those cases, you'd think it was a crime, has been reported to the FBI. I thought that might be because they all think the FBI is just covering it up, so why report it to the FBI, because they're just going to cover it up. But apparently not. Apparently they don't think the FBI is covering it up. They just don't think it has anything to do with the FBI. I don't know. But as for some of the other cases, I wouldn't be at all surprised if some of the kind of individual, what we sometimes call monster of the week ones, episodes may well be based on real cases. I don't know. I'll try and find out. That's a good question. Do you believe that there are aliens among us? How many people believe there are aliens among us? How many people do not believe there are aliens among us? Ooh, the alienists have it in this group. Isn't that interesting? How many don't know? Lots of agnostics. Okay, well that's probably a healthy place to be. There is something that worries me about this show, actually. And so far when I've asked groups, my mind has been eased on this one. But I know there are scientists and there are skeptics that worry that in doing a show like this, we are somehow conveying to people that these things are real, that there really are aliens among us, there really are abductions, there really are past life regressions, there really are paranormal spirits and stuff. And without saying whether there are or there not, I don't think the show should be arguing one way or the other on that. I mean, it's fiction that we're doing, and I hope people don't look at the show and find confirmation for their paranormal beliefs on the show. There's lots of places to study your paranormal questions and find out for yourselves, whether you really do think it's true or not true, and there's been quite a lot of work done on both sides of the issue. I mean, I would say read John Mack. I would on the pro side, and I'd say read Philip Klass on the con side, and if you're really interested in the subject. And there's an organization called PsyCop you could look at, which is the Committee for the Scientific Investigation of Claims of the Paranormal, that does very serious work by very reputable scientists on paranormal claims. And so there's very good work being done on this subject. And I just hope that people take our show as the good stories that they are, and maybe even on a kind of what if, the way one does about science fiction. But I just hope that people don't think we're telling you what you should believe, and that that we carry any weight in that regard. I don't even know whether Chris believes any of that stuff or not. I think he believes more in conspiracies than he does in the presence of aliens, from what I've heard him say. But I don't actually know, and I don't know if he cares. I'm not sure he cares whether it's real or not. Anyway, I just wanted to touch on that subject, and if anybody has questions or comments or wants to argue with me, I'd be happy to debate. Someone come to this microphone and talk to us.
All right, it's not on the alien side, but are you guys going to be moving to Hollywood or what? Or
That's a good question. That's a good question to which I don't have an answer because I don't think they've decided. I'm beginning to think we might. But boy, David Duchovny sure did put the cat among the pigeons in Vancouver, I'll tell you. It's all very well to say he'd like the show to be shot in Los Angeles because he'd like to be with his wife, but when he made comments about 400 inches of rain a day or whatever, Vancouver is all up in arms and all defending our climate and stuff, and we got this whole war going on in Vancouver with David, and I thought they should bring me in and I could make rude comments about Los Angeles, and, but we haven't done that yet. But of course it's funny because of course Vancouverites are always making those comments themselves about Vancouver. They're always making jokes about the rain, but they didn't like it when David made jokes about the rain. But I don't think that'll have anything to do with whether it moves or not. They want to make the show more palatable for David and Gillian to stay in the show. On the other hand, there are terrific locations in Vancouver, and there's a terrific crew that's been really loyal and has worked very well. So I don't know, but my guess is that they might. My guess is it might move. It'll change the look, I think. More questions, comments? Yes, yes.
If Dave and Gillian leave the show, you still going to do the X-Files?
Are you asking, am I going to do the X-Files or will the X-Files continue?
Yeah, the X-Files going to continue.
That's an excellent question. Could the show work without David and Gillian? I personally think it would work great. I think Skinner and CSM solving cases every week, I think it'd be great. Well, we need Skinner, CSM. Oh, I know, and Maria Karuba or whatever, because we got to have a woman in there. You know the one Laurie Holden plays. You know the blonde. Yeah, the blonde. Yeah. So the three of us could become a kind of triumvirate. That sounds good to me. They'd have to be more serious. I think they'd have to segue it very carefully with some new people and not just drop them, so that they kind of kept coming back or weaved its way out. I think it could be done if they wanted to do it.
They would have to accept it, the public would have to accept it, is what you're
Sorry?
saying. The public would have to accept it.
Yeah.
Is what you're saying.
Yeah, and the public wouldn't like it at first, but if they grew attracted and interested in whoever became the new leads, then we'd be fine.
I have one more question. I read that Chris wanted to get rid of the Cancer Man character early on in the show. What made him keep it on? That's what it said in our paper. Like,
who said that? When did he say that?
Is it true?
I hadn't heard that, but what I understood was that not that he wanted to get rid of the character, but that he didn't imagine the character would grow to be as big in the show as it's become, and that it would sort of hover in the background and be a mysterious presence, but that it would evolve and become so intricate a part of the fabric and so on. He didn't know, and I'm glad he didn't know, because he probably would have cast it in Los Angeles instead of in Vancouver if he did know, and you'd have Max von Sydow talking to you now, and he wouldn't be nearly as funny as I am. Yeah.
Yeah, I have two questions. Do you smoke in real life?
No, I don't smoke in real life. I did once, well, not just once, for about 20 years I smoked a lot, but I haven't smoked for 20 years.
All right, and I don't know. Did you answer the question? Like, do you believe in extraterrestrials? I don't know.
No, I managed to avoid answering that question. I thought that was quite clever of me. Because I didn't actually, because, you know, not necessarily right to take the podium to impose my views. No, I don't. I am an alienist. That's kind of a nice word, I think. Richard Dawkins talks about being an atheist, but he doesn't really have to say he's an atheist very much because there aren't people going around saying there are fairies. And the word atheist, of course, somebody who's away from theism, and so I'm away from alienism, if you like. Yeah.
Has the X-Files received any like flack from the Cancer Society or anything like that because of your character?
No, it gets flack from the other side. The only flack that I've had was from a pro-smoking group that I was painting smoking in a bad light. So I don't think there's much danger that people will watch the show and look at me smoking and go, gee, I'd like to be like that. Let me have a cigarette. And I actually, my designated charity is the Canadian Cancer Society, and I'm actually working with them in terms of various projects about anti-smoking and stuff. So.
Yes, I just have one question. I had heard that Jillian and David were a little aggravated about filming the movie along with trying to film the new season. How much more involved was filming the movie than the new season? And is that true that it was kind of hard, the time conflict involved with filming the movie and the new season at the same time?
No, I don't think there's any doubt it was really tough on them. I mean, instead of having a 3-month break in hiatus where they could either have a holiday or do some other work, play some other roles, they had a very short break and then a very grueling shooting schedule on the movie. So there's no doubt it was hard on them. And probably the $5 million each made it a little less painful, but you know, I think it was, and it did produce a crunch into the season, although their crunch in the season wasn't as bad as mine, because what happened was they wanted to shoot all their stuff before the season started shooting. So I was supposed to go shoot a few times in the summer, and at the last minute they'd cancel, they weren't ready, or whatever, and then all of a sudden September came. Okay, we're ready to have you do your stuff in the movie. And the show came along and said, okay, we've got 2 episodes for you to do on the series, all in September. So I went kind of crazy going back and forth, doing everything all at once. But yeah.
I was curious, being that you're portrayed mostly as the villain, or as the public has seen it up to this point, how are you viewed when you are out in public? Do you have... Because I know a lot of the villains in previous series and in the soap operas get very negative reactions when they're out in public. Do you experience
that's interesting because I haven't had that. I mean, obviously there's people who recognize me and don't say anything to me, so they may be feeling hostile and so don't speak to me. But the people who come up and talk to me are always quite friendly and seem to quite understand that I'm an actor who plays a villain, that I'm not necessarily a villain. The only time it was sort of close was once in Portland, of all places. I was standing in an elevator. You know how you stand and you look at the front. And I was alone in the elevator, and a woman got on. She stood, faced the front. The two of us are going up in the elevator. And then for some reason, she kind of looked to one side and she went, oh my God, you look like that scary guy from the X-Files. But when I said I was the scary guy from the X-Files, she said, oh wait, let me get my friends, we want your autograph. You know, so very quickly people seem to see the difference. So it's funny, I don't know whether it's different with soap operas, you know, whether people get, you know, more identify the actor and the character than they do in kind of primetime TV or not. That's interesting, because I haven't had that problem, really. Yeah.
When I saw you on The Outer Limits a couple years ago, you kind of played a character that was kind of like manipulating things from the background. Do you feel like you've been typecast from other roles you've been played?
It's a risk. It's a risk. And when people don't think about it, that happens. As it happens, I have my fingers crossed as we speak, because there's a movie going to be shot in LA, and they've offered this part to some real big name lead, they didn't tell me who, that they don't think is going to accept it because they can't afford him. And if he doesn't do it, then I do it. And the character is an ex-hippie who's looking for his, and finds his daughter that he has never seen from a one-night stand, 25 years ago. His own girlfriend is the same age as the daughter. And it's just a totally different kind of part, and I'm just hoping it works out, because it would be great.
Yes, you're obviously a very literate man, especially when it comes to Shakespeare. Have you ever written anything yourself?
Fragments. Haven't we all? But no, I haven't written anything that's emerged in publishable form, and I keep hoping to and thinking about it. And sometimes my interests are just too diverse, because I can't sort of pin down what it is that I actually want to do. I've thought about writing about acting, and I've thought about writing about various things. And, yeah, I even played for a while with. Suppose Cancer Man was a philosopher and writing kind of philosophical things from the viewpoint of Cancer Man, and I've played around with that a bit too. But so far nothing's emerged, but it probably will eventually.
Is Marita Covarrubias trying to help Mulder or mislead him?
That's a good question. I think she's on my side. But I'm just playing fan with you. I honestly don't know. But certainly, I mean, in one episode, I reported to her, didn't I? I mean, I was just after Skinner shot me, and well, didn't quite, but I phoned. I was talking to her, and she was standing in the syndicate room. So, I don't know. Draw your conclusions. Yeah.
I would like to know, as an actor in the show, you don't have any advanced knowledge of any of the plots or anything. They just give you the script and tell you to go do it.
Basically, that's what happens. Yeah, not most, but some series have what they call a Bible, where everything's kind of laid out before they even go into the beginning of production, and character descriptions and plot lines and all sorts of stuff. But we don't have that. We've been lucky if we see the script a few days before we shoot it. But every once in a while, somebody will tell me something. And I wonder, well, why didn't you tell me that before? I mean, because they've obviously thought about things. And, like nobody would tell me, I mean, I'm in the first 2 episodes. Nobody tells me when I'm coming back on the show. But I had lunch with a bunch of people on the weekend, and Chris was there, and he told me when I'm due back, but often I have no idea.
Also, would you move to LA if they moved the show to LA?
Sorry?
If they moved the show to LA, shoot it in LA, would you move to Los Angeles too?
I wouldn't need to move there. I mean, I would go there and shoot it. I mean, it would just mean that they fly me to LA instead of flying Mitch to Vancouver, basically. I mean, they're used to flying people one way or the other. We would just go the opposite direction. So that would work out actually fine.
First off, my compliments on that box of chocolates monologue, and that was really, really well done.
Thank you. I drew on my Shakespearean background.
Second, do you know of, this is something way out in left field, but do you know of any plans for a romance between Skinner and Scully?
Between Skinner and Scully? Well, I know Chris has said that there will never be a romance between Mulder and Scully, and he said that there would never be a romance between Skinner and Scully, and he said there would never be a romance between Skinner and Mulder. He didn't mention CSM. So I still got my hopes up.
As you just said, sometimes you don't have advance notice on what's coming up in the episodes. You don't have advanced scripts. As an actor, do you prefer to have it like that, or would you rather know what's coming up ahead in the series?
I suppose as an actor, I'd prefer to know what's coming up if I could. As a person who goes and talks to these groups, I'm just as glad I don't, because then I wouldn't be able to say anything at all. I mean, it's fun, you know, the mystery of it's fun, you know, as it unfolds, but I think one could prepare a little better if one knew. You know, I keep changing my backstory to fit the current information. Well, thank you all for coming, and keep watching the show. Of course, we're a few days away. We're in the countdown of finally starting this new season. Of course, you all know Mulder's dead, so we'll see what happens. He'll come back in another dimension or something. I mean, I don't know. We'll phase him out of the show. I mean, you know. So keep watching, and thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.